You're listening to the DVM Podcast Empire. Now with over 1 million downloads.
1 million downloads.
Find us online at DVMPE.com.
100% free.
1,000,000% fan.
And now,
Push the button.
Welcome to Push the Button Podcast, episode number 2. Today, Mr. Anderson and myself discuss Edward Snowden, the infamous NSA leaker. We debate whether or not he is a traitor or a patriot. Don't get hot.
Last night, Snowden sat down for an exclusive interview with NBC's Brian Williams in Moscow. It was Snowden's first U.S. television appearance. Here he is telling Williams how capable any well-funded intelligence agency is at tapping into cell phones.
As soon as you turn it on, it can be theirs. They can turn it into a microphone, they can take pictures from it, they can take the data off of it. But it's important to understand that these things are typically done on a targeted basis, right? It's only done when people go, this phone is suspicious.
But of course, the government's definition of suspicion is open to interpretation.
The website BuzzFeed claims a Pentagon official bluntly told them, "I would love to put a bullet in his head. I do not take pleasure in taking another human being's life, having to do it in uniform, but he is single-handedly the greatest traitor in American history."
The NSA rabble-rouser Edward Snowden. He's been labeled the world's most wanted man. But in my books, he's an American hero, which is why he is our very first real-life vigilante.
Is it possible that we have permitted ideology, political and economic philosophies, and governmental policies to keep us from considering the very real, everyday problems of our people?
So what if my feelings are hurt? Does that give me the right to prevent others from expressing their opinions?
Wait a second, Doc! Are you telling me that this sucker is nuclear?
Hey, can you push the button?
Do not touch that button.
Hey, can you push the button?
Do not touch that button.
Hey, can you push the button?
Do not touch that button.
Mr. Anderson.
Don't push it.
Hello and welcome back to Push the Button, your number one podcast about all the world's hot button issues. We're going to tear into them as we always do. I am your host, David Vox Mullen.
And I am your other host, Mr. Anderson.
Man.
Are you freaking kidding me? Don't interrupt me.
Sorry.
Anderson!
Welcome back.
What it is. What it is. What it is.
We are back. We got a hot button issue to talk about today.
Yes, we do.
Last episode, we want to thank everybody for listening so far. All of you for tuning in, and thank you for the emails that we are receiving. And, today is going to be a little different slide now. We're going to get more into the political realm. Yeah. We're going to talk about something that's pretty hot right now, and that is the case of Edward Joseph Snowden. It has been, at this point now, it's safe to say that he has been on television. They did that huge interview talking about whether or not he is to be considered a traitor or a patriot, and that's been the hot button all over Twitter, all over Facebook. Is he a traitor? Is he a patriot? Did he break the law? Did he do what was right? Is it right to break the law if it's for something that's right? What's up with this guy? And you and I haven't discussed with each other whether or not we think he is one or the other. So you and I are both going to figure out.
Not even a little bit.
This is going to be fun to find out kind of where we land. Honestly, I'm stuck. I'll tell you right now, I'm stuck.
Well, maybe I'll be able to change your opinion a little bit. Maybe not, but I sort of was stuck myself, and then I started looking into it a little bit more, and I found that looking at the NSA itself, the Constitution of the United States of America, and the idea that Edward Snowden is either a hero or a traitor sort of tie neatly together, and it helped me come to, I think, a better understanding of the situation.
Okay, well, let's lay out some facts first. What we do know is that Edward Snowden, who likes to be called Ed, so we understand, was a systems administrator Edward Joseph Snowden is an American computer professional, a former systems administrator for the Central Intelligence Agency, and a counterintelligence trainer at the Defense Intelligence Agency. He was born on June 21st, 1983, which makes him 30, in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. His parents are Lonnie Snowden. I don't have the other person, but that's okay. His education was, he studied at the University of Liverpool.
Well, before that, he was actually a high school dropout and got his GED, right?
Did not know that.
Yeah.
But that would certainly be a fact. Yes, University of Liverpool, then went to, Arundel High School. Then he went to Anne Arundel Community College. Hey, at least he got his GED and went to college. That's cool. He was also awarded the Sam Adams Award, which is an award given annually to an intelligence professional who has taken a stand for integrity and ethics. The award is given by the Sam Adams Associates for Integrity in Intelligence, a group of retired CIA officers.
Was this given to him after or before?
That is a really good question. Now, all this information I gained was on Wikipedia. This is where I got this information. If you literally go on Google right now and type in Edward Snowden, this is just the factual information that was provided. Of course, as we already know, Wikipedia can be skewed, so we have to be careful.
I know this from personal experience, from my own personal page. So
I don't have a personal page yet. Somebody needs to make me one. Because apparently you can't make one yourself, from what I've been told. From Wikipedia.
Maybe I can make it for you.
From Wikipedia when they tell me you can't do this. Anyway, so this is what we never even knew about this guy until I believe it was May 20th, 2013. Snowden flew from Hawaii to Hong Kong, where in early June he met with journalists Glenn Greenwald and Laura Poitras. Sorry, Laura.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, that I was going to butcher that name.
You let me do it. I love it. He was releasing numerous NSA documents to them. On June 9th, 4 days after the first NSA program was exposed by the press, Snowden revealed his identity in a video filmed by Poitras and published by The Guardian. On June 14th, the U.S. Department of Justice charged Snowden with 2 counts of violating the Espionage Act and theft of government property, punishable by up to 30 years in prison. The U.S. Department of State revoked his passport on June 22nd. According to the Russian newspaper, Kommersant, Snowden has then spent a couple of days in the Russian consulate in Hong Kong to declare his intention of flying to Latin America via Moscow. On June 23rd, Snowden flew to Moscow's, Sheremetyevo International Airport. I apologize to all of our Russian listeners, where he was ticketed for onward travel via Havana. But after he arrived, the Russian authorities would not let him off the plane. Fidel Castro denied the story, calling it a lie. According to ABC News, Snowden could not enter Russia because he did not have a Russian visa, and he could not travel to safe haven opportunities in Latin America because the United States had canceled his passport. Snowden remained stranded in the airport transit zone for 39 days, during which time he applied for asylum in 21 countries. Wow. On August 1st, Russian authorities granted him a 1-year temporary renewable asylum. So that's, which is where he is at today. He is currently presiding in Russia. There's tons of stuff. Again, you could go to Wikipedia and read all this stuff. But Snowden's leaked documents uncovered the existence of numerous global surveillance programs, many of them run by the NSA and the Five Eyes, with the cooperation of telecommunication companies and European governments. In 2013, the existence of the Boundless Informant was revealed, along with the program PRISM, an electronic data mining program, the X-Keyscore analytical tool, the Tempora Interception Project, the Muscular Access Point, and the massive FASCIA database, which contains trillions of device location records. Let's see here. There's so much more, but basically the point is he was exploiting the fact that the United States government not only had the ability to track people all over the United States and all over the world, but they were actively doing it. And that was the information that he released. There was
the U.S. government is spying on its citizens
on
a day-to-day basis.
Which, to be fair, I don't know if that's really a big secret or a surprise, but we never had documentation to counteract that. But again, as I know you're going to get into, that there is an issue of, I believe it's the Fourth Amendment that comes into question. But
yeah.
So this is the information. So right away, the United States immediately dubbed him bad guy. Stole government information, because he did. He took a bunch of information documents off of the computers, servers at the NSA or the CIA, and he basically handed them over to the press.
They say that this guy was basically one of the only guys that was allowed to access the entire NSA database, and he was allowed to use thumb drives because he was so good at what he did that virtually nobody else could do what this guy could do.
Okay. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's sort of why he was able to obtain all of this information, why he was the guy that ended up getting all this information.
Now, what do we want to talk about first? Do we want to talk about
what I'd like to do is, we asked the question, we posed the question, is he a hero or is he a traitor?
Right.
I guess I would like to start by first defining those terms to begin with, and then we can sort of go away from that and talk about some other things, and then come back to it at the end and sort of reassess the situation. Is he a hero or is he a traitor? So, hero, and I found this in the Merriam-Webster dictionary. A hero is a person who is admired for great or brave acts or fine qualities. A traitor, on the other hand, is a person who is not loyal to his or her own country, friends, etc., a person who betrays a country by supporting an enemy. So, like I said, I'd like to sort of let that sort of detonate on your brain for a while, think about it, and then we'll come back to that later. And I would sort of like to go back in history and look at some traitors throughout history and see what they did, what their motivating factors were.
Okay.
So, looking back through some of the most, well-known traitors throughout history, we've got, first guy that comes to mind is a guy named Robert Hansen. Now, this is a guy that worked in FBI counterintelligence in the 70s and early 80s, and he turned over to the Soviets information, names, locations of FBI double agents and other moles to the KGB. This guy did all of this for money. That was his motivating factor. You got Marcus Junius Brutus, who conspired to kill his uncle Julius Caesar.
Et tu, Brute.
Et tu, Brute. And he did this for power. He wanted to take over. You got the Rosenbergs. This is a couple an American couple who sold U.S. atomic secrets to the Russians during the Cold War. And they did this because they were communists, and so it was ideology, basically. They were both executed, I believe, in the 50s. Obviously, you got one of the most famous or infamous traitors in United States history is Benedict Arnold, who was an American general during the Revolutionary War. He was actually considered to be a patriot and a hero until he conspired to hand over the American fort at West Point, New York, to the Brits. For me, when I sort of look at this, I sort of see him as not necessarily doing it for money, power, or ideology, but sort of like doubling down almost. Like he was afraid he thought maybe the Brits were going to win, so, like he wasn't willing to commit to, I don't think that he necessarily thought that what the Americans were doing was wrong. He just thought the Brits were going to win.
Sure.
And he sort of doubled down. That's my thoughts anyways. Aldrich Ames was a CIA employee who sold secrets to the Russians. This guy gave up the names of spies, operations, and other intelligences. 100 United States military operations were compromised, and 10 Americans were executed because they were exposed. And this guy earned about $4.6 million for his efforts. So I kind of figured this guy did it for money.
Yeah,
and
I'm
actually,
catching
it's
a
true.
running theme here.
What's that?
Catching a running theme here.
And, it's interesting. This guy's really interesting. On a side note, he did it because his wife was basically a gold digger. This guy worked for the CIA. He made tons of money, $200,000 a year, which is good coin.
Sure.
and his wife was just burning through his checks. So this guy walked into the Soviet embassy and said, "I'll give up names and locations for money. What do you need me to do? Where do you need me to sign?" And so that's what happened, and he started divulging all this information, and then basically the CIA or the FBI caught onto it because this guy was, living the life. And now, like I said, he was making pretty good dough, but he wasn't making the kind of dough that, he wasn't, he shouldn't have been whining and dining on caviar and champagne and hanging out on yachts and stuff like that.
The Wolf of Wall Street, so to speak.
Exactly. And so, they were tipped off, and they did some investigation and found out this is what this guy's doing. And then last but not least, Judas Iscariot, who many people know betrayed his friend and rabbi, his teacher, Jesus Christ, for 30 pieces of silver.
Yes, sir.
So I would assume that guy did it for money. And so, yeah, as you can see, I've sort of broken it down. I looked at all these different traders, and I've sort of decided or figured out for myself that these people are motivated by one of three things. Some of them might be motivated by more than one or all three, but it seems to be that it breaks down to either money, power, or ideology.
Right. So are you going to right off the bat say all three of those things do not appear to be what Snowden was going for? All joking aside, it doesn't feel like it.
It doesn't feel like it to me. No, it doesn't feel like it to me. I mean, you look at this guy, like you said, 30 years old, computer geek. He was making $200,000 a year. He made his last job that he worked at for 3 months and made $133,000 in 3 months. It might have been more than that, but I think it was $133,000. So it doesn't appear that this guy was, and then when you look at things that he said while he was giving up this information, he said, I quote, "I understand that I will be made to suffer for my actions, and that the return of this information to the public marks my end," end quote. So, this guy is basically foreshadowing, hey, when people find out what I did, and that I gave up this information, I'm done for.
Yeah.
So this doesn't appear to be a guy who is looking for money, certainly not vying for political office or power. And the only thing that I can see as far as ideology goes is he gave money to Ron Paul's campaign. I think he contributed on 2 different occasions, $250 each to Ron Paul's, to separate Ron Paul campaigns.
Sure.
And Ron Paul is a constitutionalist and is always sort of preaching about how the government needs to back off and we need to sort of, peel back our government. And I think he's sort of spoken out about this spying and things like that before. He's a constitutionalist. So if there's any ideology to be gleaned or had from this guy, I think it would be that, maybe he's a libertarian.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the only ideology he could gain would be the guy who exposed it. Like, that's what if he was going for ideology, he'd be going for, I want to be known as the guy who exposed the government.
Right.
And that may be the case, although, I don't know.
Which you could think that, it's possible that, if he's the guy that exposes it and he ends up not being prosecuted for this, imprisoned and fined, and I guess who cares if he gets fined, but as long as he stays out of prison, it's possible that one of the news networks could pick him up as as an anchor or as a commentator,
write a book, or there have been books already been written, so but he didn't write any yet.
Exactly.
Okay,
there's a little money to be made, but again, I don't think that that's enough to, this guy gave away. He spilled the beans big time.
I don't remember the exact quote, but when I watched that interview, that hot interview that he did not too long ago, he said, anybody who would literally burn their life up like this wouldn't do it for no reason. And it's an interesting thing to say because he knew what he was going to sacrifice. He knew he was going to basically become, threat number one. The only thing that shocked me, and apparently I already got a feeling where we're at, the only thing that shocked me is how quickly the government would come out in against him. How quickly? I mean, just absolutely. He's given up secrets. Our soldiers are going to be at risk. All these different things.
Yeah, but I guess from what I've gathered, that the WikiLeaks guy,
Julian Assange,
right? And the Bradley Manning, or what is her name now? She had a sex change operation.
I don't know what it is.
Whatever,
now,
something Manning.
But yeah.
The information that was given there contained all sorts of assets around the globe and locations and names and places and things like that.
And the big deal with Julian Assange was he was presented with an option to redact a bunch of stuff, and he refused to do it. He wanted to leak it open.
And this guy looked at that case and said, I don't want that to happen. At least that's what it appears to be. I don't want that to happen. And so he did make sure that he sort of edited or redacted that type of information.
And this just came out recently in his big interview where he said that he specifically did not give information that would jeopardize Americans, period. He specifically said he did not give the press information that would jeopardize military forces or anything like that.
Right.
Which means he's at least thinking ahead. I think. So now we need to get into, because my wife asked me the same question. Well, is he a whistleblower or is he, just a conspiracist or whatever? And what are the rules of a whistleblower? A whistleblower has to have evidence that he or she has brought it up to superiors. A whistleblower has to show that multiple attempts to voice concerns can be proven, seek legal counsel, all that stuff. What we now know is that is exactly what happened. He did, there are email trails that do exist. They have been confirmed that at least on one occasion there's an email that can be tracked that says that he went to a supervisor pointing out the flagrant disregard for the Constitution in what was being done, and he was basically told to sit down and shut the hell up.
I know he claims that, he tried to bring this up to anyone who would listen, and he sent several emails. I believe that the U.S. officials have only confirmed or released one of those said emails.
But
I think the one that they released was one that was strangely devoid of any of that kind of information. So.
Yeah, it's tricky. Here's the one thing I find interesting. And this is why I love this podcast, dude, because we could just tear into this stuff. When the interview was going to go live, that morning, Secretary of State John Kerry of the United States got on the news and lambasted Snowden. It was almost like a preemptive strike. Where he was just, this guy's, terrible. He's a traitor. He's, just blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay. And at first I was like, yeah, well, that does suck if he gave off all this stuff. But I didn't want to make an assumption. I wanted to hear what Snowden had to say himself. And I, unlike a lot of people apparently, watched the whole interview.
Yeah, I still haven't seen the interview, and I can't find it anywhere. So if anybody has a link that they can share with me.
I'm sure it's on the network that did the interview. I'm not absolutely certain which one it is, so I don't want to quote it.
I couldn't find it on YouTube, so
if we can find the interview, we'll definitely put it on our Facebook page, and I'll make sure you get a copy of it. But basically, after I heard Snowden's side of the story, and again, I understand that his is going to be skewed towards his own feelings, but when I started looking factually at what transpired, I have to say that I did, in the beginning, think, wow, that was, this guy, he gave up secrets, period. But when I saw the interview, I thought, wow, no, he tried to do the right thing. He tried to go up the chain and was told to shut up, but he saw a flagrant breaking of the law. Now, I don't want to turn this into, the United States or the current administration or whatever, but there have been many accounts, some extremely recently, where the current United States administration has basically gone against what is set up in the U.S. Constitution. And again, I don't want to get into specifics because I don't want to date this podcast, but things have been going on. I can think of at least 3 different instances where the President of the United States has been accused of breaking the law with executive orders and things like that, which would technically be against the Constitution. The President was a lawyer, so who knows what's going to happen with all that. But
right.
So when you're in that position that Snowden was in, it's interesting. As a viewer, as an American, as an observer, I see Secretary of State John Kerry, President Barack Obama calling him a 2-bit hacker, a nothing. But then I'm wondering why the CIA gives him all this authority. It tells me that somebody's not being forthcoming. So again, like you and I have said, not so much the words, but the facts, the actions.
Well, and so, we'll go back to that question of, like, some people have accused him of not going through the proper channels, right?
Okay.
He didn't go through the proper channels. Well, obviously, if the emails that are there, that's sort of a fallacious argument. But let's say for the sake that, he didn't go through the proper channels. Well, with that being said, most Americans by now know when somebody says the name Edward Snowden, they immediately get a picture in their head, either hero or traitor, right?
Right.
This is a guy who exposed the idea that the government is spying on its citizens. Well, with that being said, how many Americans know these names? Thomas Drake, William Binney, J. Kirk Wiebe, or Ed Loomis? Did any of those come up?
I know I don't know those names.
Right. And the reason you don't, and then the reason you don't know those names is because these are guys who, unlike Snowden was a guy who, worked in the CIA for a little while and then he worked as a contractor. These guys were lifers in the NSA, like 30 years a piece, They say that Thomas Drake, William Binney, and J. Kirk Wiebe have a combined total of over 100 years working for the NSA.
Wow.
These are guys who did go through the proper channels. They brought it up first to their superiors, then they brought it up to the FBI investigators, then they went to congressional oversight committees, and then when none of those worked, they went to the news media. And these guys were lambasted. They were vilified. They were marginalized, and they were criminalized because, Thomas Drake was actually persecuted under the Espionage Act. A total of 10 charges were brought up against this guy, and eventually, luckily, they were all dropped. And he ended up pleading to a misdemeanor, spending too much time on a computer or something like that. William Binney was investigated by the FBI and had his home raided. And he has testified that the NSA is in direct violation of the Constitution.
Well, let me stop you because I want to play the audience member who doesn't know what you're talking about. Why is that in direct conflict with the Constitution? I know why, but
okay. So
I know you're a Constitution fan, so I know you'll know.
Let's look at the Bill of Rights. Okay. In the Bill of Rights, the Fourth Amendment, the fourth thing that when the founding fathers were sitting around, they said, like, 1, freedom of speech, 2, right to bear arms. The fourth thing that they thought was important was this, and this is how it reads, quote, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Now, basically, what this says is that if the United States, if the FBI or the CIA determine that there is a terrorist cell operating in Minneapolis, Minnesota,
right,
and they can't figure out exactly where this terrorist organization is or who's involved in it, they can't just go to Mr. Anderson's house and break the door down and toss my house and look through, all of my files, my computers, pull drawers, cut open mattresses and things like that. They can't do that. They have to go to a judge. They have to, present evidence to get a warrant. They have to swear on a Bible, or they just have to take an oath, basically swearing that the evidence that they present is in fact true. And then they have to specifically state, like, we're going to go to Mr. Anderson's house and we're going to look through. We're going to seize his computers. We're going to seize his files. That's it. They can't come and like empty out my drawers, and they can't rip open my mattresses and these kinds of things. It has to. It says particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized.
Right.
Now, today we have on us at all times our cell phones. Our cell phones contain a lot of those, what in the past were papers and effects.
Sure.
So virtually, I think in essence what the government is doing by monitoring, and you look at the PRISM, what PRISM was doing.
The data collection, yeah.
The data collection, the data mining. They're literally, they ordered Verizon, the phone company, to give up on a daily basis. They have to send over a log of all phone calls and contacts. They're recording everything, every email, every text message, every phone call.
They're probably recording this because
they're
it's on the
probably
internet.
recording this. They're probably intercepting it before it gets to you people. And to me, this is in direct violation. Now, strangely enough, the U.S. Supreme Court refuses to look into this matter. They are preferring to allow lower courts to sort of hash it out first before they. I think what they're doing is they're sitting back and watching from on high what the people do and how they react to it. But so far, a New York federal judge has ruled that the NSA keeping records on every phone call made in the United States is somehow legal and constitutional. I can't for the life of me figure that out.
Well, I think you kind of covered it when you said because these cell phones contain our own personal effects and documents, that it's just the new media, it's the new way of life. So when this is where it gets tricky. If they require a warrant and they want to get those documents, they just seize your phone. The problem is unless they've received the warrant or acquired the warrant, they can't look at it. So what they've done is they work under this idea of almost eminent domain, but the idea that, and eventually they're going to need to look at it, so they're requiring Verizon and AT&T and all these companies to provide these logs that they don't look at.
You're guilty until proven innocent.
Exactly. So the idea is that you give us these logs, we'll store them in a data warehouse, we'll allegedly not look at them unless we have reason to, then we'll get a warrant so that we can go back and look at the data, which to me is like, if you already have it, who's going to stop you?
Right, and they can invent whatever kind of evidence that they want to if they want to go look at somebody.
Well, the real issue that Snowden was exploiting, whether or not he's a good guy or bad guy, what he's exploiting is that because they have that technology, and this is the fact, what he exploited is they were illegally looking at this stuff without a warrant. They were still looking at it. People were using it to look on their friends and spouses. They were looking at it to.
They were monitoring Americans playing World of Warcraft.
Yeah, they were abusing the ability.
They were using these techniques and information to spy on their love interests. They would look at somebody who they, viewed as a political enemy, and if they wanted to discredit them, they would watch what their, internet porn activity was, and they would record it and then present it back to them. This is something that was done to Martin Luther King Jr. I don't know if you remember or not, but I believe it was the FBI basically went to him and said
there was something about infidelity, right?
Right. They had video or pictures of him having sex with or in a precarious predicament with somebody that wasn't his wife.
Sure.
And they basically said to him, you should kill yourself.
Wow.
So, this kind of stuff, and there's, incident after incident after incident recorded of the FBI monitoring celebrities and doing these kinds of things to celebrities back in the 50s.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's, that you get into the whole JFK thing and all of that. But so what we've established is that basically what Edward Snowden did was honestly confirm what we were suspicious of for a few years since the Patriot Act. Now, and I want to talk about the Patriot Act because the Patriot Act seems to be the blanket in which all of this stuff became possible.
Exactly.
Now, I will readily admit, and I've admitted this in other conversations online and other podcasts, but I will readily admit that when the Patriot Act was presented, I unfortunately was for it. I have no problem admitting that because I can totally admit that I have since regretted that decision.
And this guy right here, this guy, guilty.
I think that we were played. I think our emotions were played on 9/11 was such a big deal, and we just wanted to get the bad guys so much that they said, hey, you know what? You want to get them? Well, we can do it if you let us do this. And we said, okay, do it. And we let our congressmen vote for it, and our senators voted for it, and bang, Patriot Act. And all of a sudden, we looked at it and went, hey, wait a minute. But you can use that on us.
Well, that's just the thing, when looking at politics, remember that something that you vote in today under a president or set of leaders that you agree with or that you trust, you give them power today. 20 years from now, they're not going to be in power anymore, and you don't know who you're going to get to replace them. So those powers and those liberties that you give up today could be abused by somebody down the line. I love to quote our founding fathers, and Benjamin Franklin said, "Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety."
Yeah, hear, hear. I agree 150% with that. That's the hard part. So, you and I are obviously in agreement with the Constitution. We're in agreement that what the United States government is doing as far as abuse of their authority is wrong. Whether it's morally wrong or not is irrelevant. It's constitutionally wrong.
Yeah.
And so that brings us back down to Ed Snowden and the actions that he took. Now, where I'm at right now personally is in my mind, he is neither a traitor or a patriot yet. What has to happen in order for me to consider him a patriot is he has to stand and answer for the actual laws that he did get accused of breaking. Because he knows that he broke the law. He admits, I did what was right, and America is founded on men who broke the law.
Right. All of our founding fathers were considered traitors at one point.
Right. And
the King of England.
So here's the thing. I will have the utmost respect for Ed Snowden if he comes to America and stands for what he did. That, to me, would make him a hero, to face that, knowing that what he did was for the greater good. That being said, I don't think that it's safe for him to do it right now. I think he probably needs to wait until the end of this administration, because this administration got lambasted by the materials that he released. So there's conflict of interest. Just legally, there's conflict of interest. Because I don't think he'd be faced with criminal justice. I think he'd be faced with federal court.
Yeah.
So I think we'd have to wait until this administration is over and wait and see kind of what the next administration will be in 2 years.
And to me, I think that you need to, obviously history will show one day whether this guy's a hero or a traitor. But, if the exposure of this information to the American people brings about some sort of change where, the government realizes, hey, we're violating people's constitutional rights, their freedoms, and we need to stop this, and there's some sort of legislation put into effect that, stops the NSA from doing this, stops the federal government from spying on its people, then I think he will definitely be regarded on some level as a hero. My only reservation about the hero claim is that while I think that he bringing these sorts of things to the attention of the American people is one thing, and I think that's very heroic and brave. Bravery isn't the absence of fear, it's doing something in the face of fear.
Sure.
And he was obviously afraid that what he was about to do or what he did was going to get him into a lot of hot water.
Yeah, I mean, he knew he had to run. I get that.
And, it's true to this day. He's still on the run, sort of. And, he
probably
is.
wishes it was some other country than Russia, though, because right now that does not look good.
Yep. So,
but he went there
think
before all the fit hit the shan with them. So,
but my one reservation is the idea that he didn't just stop there. He didn't just say, "Hey, folks, the government's spying on you." He also then went ahead and said, "We're also spying on China. We're spying on this country and that country." And that, to me, sort of starts to. It doesn't make it right, but I think you take care of home first. And I think had he just brought those things to the attention of the American people, that other stuff would have cleaned itself up in due time. It's possible anyways. So that's my one reservation is that, he went ahead and said, we're spying on other countries too.
Well, and I'm not looking to defend the guy. I will say, from what I understand, he himself released a large amount of information to these two journalists. And these two journalists were the ones who were responsible for actually releasing specific information.
And also, I read somewhere that it's sort of interesting that they would release a piece of information and then wait for the government to make a reaction. And they would deny something, and then they would release another piece of information, basically, exposing the government as lying. Well,
that's just it, though. Let's look at both sides of the coin. Let's say Edward Snowden is lying. Let's say he can't even say he's lying.
Yeah, he's not lying.
We know he's not lying. Okay, so let's reverse it. Let's work from the assumption that the government is lying. They have everything to lose, so they have to hide all this information. It makes sense that they're lambasting this guy and trying to discredit him, as any attorney would in a typical trial. If you've got a star witness, you want to discredit that witness. So it's kind of the same thing. Ed Snowden is the witness of the atrocities that are being enacted amongst the American people and around the world. And so what they're trying to do is discredit the witness. That's, like I said, that John Kerry interview that he did, 6 to 8 hours before the interview with Snowden went live was purely, obviously, political theater. It was, we've got to make this guy look as bad as possible so people have this information in their head before they watch this interview.
Yep.
And I think it was one of the highest rated interviews on television that night. So everybody watched it, except you.
Except for me. I don't even remember what I was doing. I was probably on the road. So.
But it's one of those things where I felt one way in the beginning. And I definitely, as more information came out and the more bits and facts came out, the more it became an issue where maybe this guy wasn't super smart. I didn't expect him to be a political genius.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, I think, I'm ready to step out on a limb here. I think what he did was the right thing. It sucks.
Yeah.
And I think he can either stand trial or not. I'm just saying, if he stands trial, I'll have even more respect for him because then he believes in what he was fighting for. That shows me that he believes in his country. At great risk. I get it.
Yeah. And that to me, Thomas Drake, William Binney, J. Carrick Weeby, Ed Loomis, they're all standing back saying, we told you guys so.
Yeah.
We told you. We tried to tell you people, and you didn't listen. So, I saw an interview with these guys, and they basically said he did the right thing.
Yeah.
We tried. He watched what we did. He saw us go through all the proper channels and use our chain of command, and he saw where it got us. It got us into all kinds of hot water.
Yeah.
And we barely escaped by the hair on our chins. And so, at least in their eyes, what he did was right. I like, one of the arguments that I've heard, it's kind of sort of interesting. One of the arguments that I've heard is that, our founding fathers, when talking about the Fourth Amendment and the Bill of Rights,
mm-hmm.
our founding fathers could never have envisioned the world that we live in today, the technology and the idea that people would fly planes into buildings and these kinds of things. And so, I guess that's their argument for the elimination of or the circumvention of the Fourth Amendment, or at least the modification of it.
Yeah, I hear that and I get angry.
I would like to say map that onto the way we view free speech. I mean, our founding fathers could never have envisioned the idea that we would have the world at our fingertips, in our pockets, that we would have cell phones, that we can, I can basically I can say something inflammatory on my Twitter, and if it's inflammatory enough, the world will know about it in 15 minutes.
Yeah, you'll be number one trending topic.
So, we would never dare say, well, we should really limit people's free speech, because our founding fathers could never envision that we would have this technology. I mean, back when the founding fathers wrote the Constitution, we had printing presses.
Yeah, I disagree with that argument because I'm awesome. And no, but okay, fine. So they didn't have planes, they didn't have television. But what they did have was people with motive. They still had, people. I mean, if during the Revolutionary War, if Britain could have found a way to destroy the buildings, whether it be by fire or mortar, they would have done it.
Yes.
So, yeah, they have to protect that. Free speech, I'll tell you what, I don't know if this is the mentality of our founding fathers, but what I've learned as a young man growing up in the Midwest, when somebody is running their mouth, I am a huge advocate for letting them run it. Let them run it. Don't censor it. Because if you say, don't let people hear what you got to say, the first knee-jerk reaction to the innocent is, well, what are they trying to hide? What do they not want us to hear? Maybe this person's right. No, if this person is crazy, let them talk. Right. So that you can educate yourself and go, okay, yeah, I don't think I agree with everything that guy says. So I'm a big fan of free speech. Even if I don't agree with what somebody has to say, let them say it. Please let them say it. Because if you don't get to hear all of it, you'll never get to make a full judgment. You'll never get to make a full opinion.
And some of the quote-unquote craziest ideas in human history have been presented and shot down. Take, for instance, the idea that people once thought that the earth was flat, and then somebody had the audacity to step forward and say, no, I think we should think about this a little differently. Here's why. And look, these people were burned at the stake. They were persecuted.
I have to do this. I got to throw this at you. You do know that the Bible called the world a sphere in the book of Job.
No, it says that they looked at the round of the world, and which can be interpreted as,
I'm sure, in different
the earth is not round, it's spheroid or spherical in shape.
The point is, I remember reading that Christopher Columbus presented that information to the Catholic Church, and they were like, no. And he's like, this is your stuff. And they're like, no.
But I've also heard it, it's been described as they use round because when you stand and you turn in 360 degrees, it's a round.
Either way, it's just funny.
I disagree vehemently.
I love how anyone, faith, science, political, no one can just say, this is what it is.
Right.
And that's the interesting point. And
like I said, there is no black or white. Most topics fall into the gray areas.
And I hate that.
If you really look at it, if you really do the homework and you sit back and you look at both sides, if you're a conservative, don't just watch Fox News. Don't just watch Fox News. If you're a Democrat or a liberal, don't just watch MSNBC. Look at both sides. Look at all the arguments. Look at the facts. You can find the facts if you do some digging. You can actually find.
That's a challenge that we should put everybody who watches news in America. And again, we understand that we have listeners from around the world, but in the United States, we're talking to you. I challenge you. Watch both of them. CNN, Fox News, watch them both. I mean, because that's what I do. I'll watch both. The same story, I'll watch both, and just, you can obviously see the slant one way or the other, and then just try to look at the middle and try to look at the facts. And that's where you get the information. Or just download the Associated Press app for your iPhone or iPad or whatever, and then you just get the raw facts. That's
hardcore information.
That's kind of how I roll these days. But yeah.
Hero or traitor? I mean, like
I'm leaning 90% towards hero. Patriot.
Towards patriot. You know, and me, when I go back and I look at those definitions,
yeah,
a hero is a person who is admired for great or brave acts or fine qualities. This guy displayed a certain amount of bravery by doing what he did. He knew
not
that
saying
he could,
smart, just brave.
No, and all heroes haven't necessarily had, you know, smarts or street smarts back. This guy's definitely intelligent.
Yeah.
You know, he's not political, which I don't have a problem with. I think, you know, one of the big problems in this country right now is the fact that we are politicized. You know, the people that are in power stay in power. You know, you got a guy in, was it Mississippi, that's up for re-election. He's been in the Senate for 36 years.
Yeah, that's too much.
You know, come on. And these guys, and you know, people say it time and time again, and we're getting off on a tangent here, but people say this all the time that, you know, we need term limits for these guys. And none of them are willing to put that to a vote. None of them.
Yeah, that's
none of them are willing to do it. But, so, you know, he displayed, in my estimation, he displayed a significant amount of bravery because he knew what the consequences were going to be. Or at least, you know, that he was going to be in trouble.
He had an idea, yeah.
Didn't know the extent. And then you look at, you know, a traitor is a person who is not loyal to his or her own country. A person who betrays a country by supporting an enemy. And I don't see anywhere in what he did that supports our enemies.
No, not one bit. And I think in order to be deemed a traitor, you have to have proof that your intention was to harm our country. And that was the whole case with Bradley Manning, was they had to prove that he had the intention of putting Americans in harm's way. And I guarantee that Snowden was not going for that intention.
Or he wouldn't have scrubbed
exactly
each document of those names and locations and, you know.
Yeah. So that being said, that's where we fall.
Yep. I also am leaning heavily, very heavily towards hero or patriot, with the caveat that I reserve the right to change my opinion when presented with new ideas or facts.
Right. Absolutely. And like I said, he can't come back to the States right now. He's got to wait at least another 2 years. It's just not the right time. This administration got burned way too bad by the things that he released. You know, this administration didn't create the Patriot Act, but this administration certainly abused it.
Well, and certainly, you know, using it, all the things that Obama said he was going to do when he got in office. It turns out that when you look at it, Obama's got a pretty similar track record to the guy before him.
Yeah. Oh, man. Oh, so many things we could talk about.
So many things we can talk about.
All right. Well, listen, thanks everybody for tuning in. It's been a fantastic ride. Ken, this was a blast. Again, I love it. Hit us up on email, pushthebuttonpodcast@gmail.com. Send us an email. Tell us what you think. Hero, traitor, let us know. We want to know about it. We're going to do a special episode in the coming episode weeks, and we'll talk about your emails and stuff. So send them in. We love hearing from you. Find us on Twitter. I believe it's pushbuttonpod. And you can find us on Facebook and a bunch of other stuff. Until next time, I am David Vox Mullen.
And I am Mr. Anderson. And hey, think about it. Don't get hot.
Mr. Anderson.
Don't push it.